Hey, what's up guys? Today I'll show you an adventure drama film, The Life of Pi. Spoiler ahead, watch out and take care. Pi Patel is approached by a local novelist who believes that Pi's life story would make a great book. His parents have named him Piscine Militer after a swimming pool in France. In an India where many more speak English than French, his playmates of course nickname him P. Determined to put an end to this, he adopts the name Pi. At first, his classmates do not buy it. However, he demonstrates an uncanny ability to write down that mathematical constant that begins with 3.14 and never ends. From then on, Pi has earned respect from his playmates and teachers, becoming the legend of his secondary school. Pi comes from a Hindu family. His father runs a zoo, while his mother is a botanist. He is introduced to Hinduism at an early age by his mother, and regards various gods as his superheroes. But before long, he is equally drawn to Roman Catholicism and Islam, and he also practices vegetarianism. Pi's father is a new kind of Indian, who believes in understanding the world through science. Father says that Pi cannot have three different beliefs at the same time, or if he believes in all of them, he does not believe in any of them. But Pi is not daunted in his own faith. Pi thinks that man and beasts have souls, and that even beasts would not hurt others if treated with sincerity. One day, Pi secretly brings his elder brother to the tiger shelter at the zoo to feed a tiger named Parker. Alerted by his brother, Father comes to bring Pi away before the tiger attacks him. To teach him a lesson, Father asks his servant to lure the tiger with a goat. Once the gate is opened, Parker runs to the goat and devours it. This particular scene has become a trauma for Pi, and his faith shatters. Growing up, Pi spends most of his leisure time exploring novels and philosophy as a means to understand the meaning of life. One day, he crosses paths with a dancer, intrigued by her dance movements. Pi follows Dancer to ask her the meaning of a dance movement. Dancer is amused when he mimics the dance, and explains that it means the lotus flower is hidden in the woods. Afterward, Pi falls in love with Dancer, and brings her to see Parker. However, Father's zoo goes broke in the economic recession, and he plans to ship the animals to North America for sales. He also announces that the whole family will migrate to Canada. Despite Pi's strong objection, Father does not change his mind. Before departure, he spends some sweet time with Dancer. Dancer ties a red bracelet on Pi's wrist. Many years later, Pi cannot recall how they bid farewell to one another, so Pi boards the ship overseas. At dinner time, even though Mother requests vegetarian food, the snobbish chef still gives her meat. Mother insists on her choice, but Chef does not give in. Enraged by Chef's nasty attitude, Father fights with him. Later, as Pi's family is disappointed with the meal, a Buddhist sailor tells them meat gravy is not counted as meat. Even so, Pi refuses to eat it. As the ship makes its way into the Mariana Trench, it suffers a cataclysmic event. In the raging storm, the huge waves lash against the deck. Awakened, Pi goes to the deck with much excitement. Soon after, the seawater enters the ship, causing the ship to sink. Pi rushes back to the cabins to save his family, only to find them fully submerged in water. Helpless, he returns to the deck to enlist help. At this time, Chef and a few sailors are untying the lifeboat. In the chaos, Pi is pushed onto the lifeboat. As soon as a zebra jumps down to the same lifeboat, the rope is broken. The lifeboat is set adrift and pushed further and further away by the huge waves. Looking at the sinking cargo ship, Pi whistles and shouts helplessly. At this time, he suddenly sees someone swimming towards him. So he rushes to help, but finds that it is Tiger Parker. Frightened by Parker's arrival, Pi dives into the sea. But when he sees the sunk ship, he realizes he needs to return to the lifeboat. To avoid the tiger, he lies on the mast of the boat and desperately cries out for his family. The next morning, Pi wakes up on the mast with only the lame zebra on board. He quickly clears the water from the boat, but the hyena suddenly comes out. Pi is so afraid of the hyena that he stumbles back to the mast. In the meantime, a mother gorilla is approaching the boat, riding on some bananas. Pi pulls the gorilla on board, and asks her where her children are. In reply, the gorilla gazes at sea sadly. That night, hungry hyena begins biting zebras. Pi and gorilla fail to stop it, so zebra dies. Later, Pi discovers a guide to surviving at sea, as well as many life jackets and supplies. He makes a simple raft out of life jackets and the oars. All of a sudden, the hyena appears to wrestle with the gorilla, and kills her. Furious at the gorilla's death, Pi stands up to fight against the hyena. To his shock, Parker descends on the boat out of nowhere to put down the hyena at once. Pi leaves the boat in fear and gets on his raft. Later, Pi sneaks back to the boat to obtain some supplies while Parker is sleeping. He spots a rat running around the supplies. Unexpectedly, Parker awakens, so Pi feeds Parker with the rat and returns to his raft. Comes night, Pi cries in despair alone, drifting on the raft. The gloomy sea is covered by endless darkness until dawn. At the sun rises, the sea looks like a mirror, reflecting the white boat and the boy as if they are floating in a brilliant cloud. Pi writes a letter with pen and paper, puts it in a jar, and throws it into the sea. He stands between the sea and the sky, earnestly seeking divine guidance. After that, he begins to study the Sea Survival Guide, mastering many survival skills. He also uses the techniques provided in the guide to shake the boat so violently that Parker develops a seasick reflex. At first, Pi tries to divide the territory with Parker by peeing, but Parker pees all over his face. As Parker could swim to his raft and eat him at any time, Pi has to learn to fish to feed Parker. However, Parker still dives into the sea out of its hunger, but it fails to get any food. Seeing Parker drawing near, Pi flees to the lifeboat. Parker, however, is trapped at sea and cannot get on the boat. Pi initially draws his raft to the boat and plans to abandon Parker. But he cannot bear to let the tiger die, so he lifts it up to the boat and again returns to his raft. One day, Pi has got a fish, but he cries bitterly after killing the fish. He gives thanks to God for saving his life by sending the fish, and then Pi whistles to Parker and feeds it with the fish. When Pi enjoys the superb sea view in the evening, a giant whale rises into the air and knocks Pi's raft over, throwing all food and drinking water into seawater. Just when Pi gets anxious at the shortage of food, a huge flock of fish flies into the boat. Pi succeeds in snatching a big fish from Parker for food, eating it raw for the very first time. Since it is dangerous to travel between the boat and raft, Pi bravely declares war on the tiger and tames it with wisdom and courage. Following that, he not only makes peace with the tiger on the ship, but also has secured his own place. On his journey into the unknown, Pi has learned to survive and adapt, keeping a diary of his drift. He realizes that he could not live without the tiger, and the fear of the tiger keeps him alert. Furthermore, to meet Parker's survival needs, he has a new purpose in life. One day, Pi sees a ship sailing past them. He immediately sends out a signal for help, but to no avail. Pi is somehow upset, but he does not want to give up his hope. Day after day, still no one comes to rescue him. In the peaceful evening, Pi sees a mysterious and amazing vortex of memory at the sea bottom, where various kinds of animals, and even his mother's face appear. But Pi knows clearly that the cargo ship which carries his family members is buried in the sea. Pi continues to keep a diary every day, hoping to find salvation through words. He cannot tell day from night, dream from reality. In the confusion and trance, a storm comes. The boat shakes violently, and his diary is swept away by the wind. Pi praises God for his saving grace, kneeling on the white canvas. He asks Parker to worship God, but Parker is in a fearful struggle against the waves. Pi questions God why he wants to terrify Parker, the one and only companion that he has now. And then Pi returns to the cabin, hiding under the sail of the boat. After the storm subsided, Pi drinks a little of the rainwater to rejuvenate, and offers some of it to Parker. Sadly, Parker seems to be on its last legs. Stroking on Parker, Pi prepares himself for death. However, when he regains his consciousness, they are on an island full of greens. Pi immediately satiates his hunger with food, and walks into the island. The island is completely covered by plants and roots. In the middle of the island, there are many small circular lakes surrounded by mongooses. Pi happily goes for a swim in the lake, while Parker preys on the mongoose for food. Pi then wanders around in the woods and ties the bracelet gifted by Dancer to a tree root. At dusk, all the mongooses hurry to the trees, and Pi also retreats to his boat in fear. At night, Pi finds the lake glowing, and the fishes within it are eroded. At this moment, the island now looks like a lying female body. Later, Pi finds a human tooth in a lotus-like flower. It turns out to be a cannibal island, where the lake water is fresh by day. But at night the fresh water turns into acid to corrode and dissolve the living things inside. And that tooth probably is left behind by someone who came to the island and died there alone. Pi does not want to end up like this man, forgotten and alone. He longs to return to the civilized world, even if he has to die. The next day, Pi loads his boat with fresh water and plants, and half a boat full of the mongoose for Parker. Following Pi's whistle, Parker boards the boat, and they set off. It is said that the island disappears after their departure, and no one has ever seen it. Pi regards such an experience as God's providence for him. Even in extreme difficulties, God does not abandon him, but always helps him. After drifting for an unknown period of time, Pi finally reaches the shore. As he lies exhausted on the beach, Parker walks into the jungle without looking back. Pi does not fathom why Parker just forsakes him without any lingering, though they have been through so much together. So when Pi is finally rescued by the locals, he bursts into cries for the loss of his best friend Parker during the hardship. Investigators from the shipping company come to find out the cause of the wreck. Pi tells them his story, but they do not believe in such a fantasy. So Pi gives them another version of the story. 4 passengers are saved from the sunk ship, namely Pi, Mother, Chef, and Buddhist Sailor. Sailor breaks his leg as he jumps down to the lifeboat. Chef amputates Sailor's leg to save him, but Sailor still dies. Chef sets up Sailor's corpse as bait to catch fish, rationalizing that they need more food for survival. Knowing it, Mother confronts Chef with fury, but Chef brutally eats up Sailor's body. 1 week later, Pi is beaten up by Chef for accidentally setting a tortoise free. To protect Pi, Mother wrestles with Chef, but the Chef slays her. This arouses the evil side in Pi, and he impales Chef with a knife the next day. From then on, he floats alone across the Pacific until he is rescued. The investigators do not utter a word, for they somehow dislike the second version. Writer is shrewd enough to draw links between the 2 stories. Animals in the first story share similarities with the human characters of the second story. To be specific, the zebra with a broken leg corresponds to a Buddhist sailor who breaks his leg. The hyena stands for cruel Chef. The mother gorilla represents Mother, while the tiger Parker refers to Pi himself, the evil side of him, that was aroused during the battle against primitive nature and hardships. Good and evil, being 2 sides of human's instinct, may coexist within one person. And Pi, instead of taming the atrocious tiger during the whole journey, was actually struggling hard to maintain a balance between good and evil, even though he knew it's the evil instinct that helped him survive those extreme hardships. This implies the reason why the tiger just walked away without lingering, and Pi cried hard for the loss of his best friend, right after they reached the civilized world. A world that definitely doesn't belong to the tiger Parker, the evil side of Pi. When asked which story is better, writer prefers the one with Parker for it is more interesting. Learning that Pi is married with children, writer concludes that Pi's story has a wonderful ending. In fact, the investigators also choose to believe the first story, and they praise Pi for his bravery and tenacity. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Peace out.